Hello Summoners, and welcome to another Pro Guides video. I'm Tia, and today we'll be talking about the 3 easiest champs to climb with in each role. Whether you're new to League, looking to swap to a new role, or just looking for a champ you can practically play on autopilot, these are the most user-friendly champs to just pick up and play a game with. So, click that little sub button, and let's get into it.
Starting things off in the top lane, we predictably have 3 tank picks, starting with Malphite. When it comes to top laners, tanks may not always be the most exciting options, since they lack the mobility and flashy outplay potential that the bruisers of the role have. But it's exactly that lack of decision-making and mechanical requirement that makes them so easy to pick up and play. In Malphite's case, laning comes down to 2 playstyles. Against AD melee champs that you easily beat 1v1, like Trin, Irelia, and Wukong, you use your E to cripple their attack speed and auto it out. You'll always take the better end of the trade, especially if you opt for Grasp over Comet in these types of lanes. You'll be draining them of their HP with every trade you take, as they struggle to even break your passive shield. In all other lanes, you'll simply go Q max with Arcane Comet and spam Q through the lane phase with no other real interaction. It really doesn't get any simpler than that. Once you're out of lane phase, it's not quite rocket science either. Farm a side lane, matching your lane opponent until it's time to group up for a team fight. Once you do, you hold the go button for your team. While it can be tempting to go for the most targets possible, prioritize quality over quantity. It's better to ult a single fed carry than 3 low priority targets. Malphite has been around since pretty close to the start of League. Even with that old age, he's only received minor touch-ups to his kit, and he's still going strong over 10 years later, even though plenty of more recent releases have gotten reworks and full VGUs. That leads us to today's question of the day. What are some other champs that have stood the test of time? Let us know which older champs with relatively unchanged kits have resisted the power creep of modern League releases down in the comments below. Our second top laner is Maokai. Maokai's laning is a bit more interactive than Malphite, but the only real mechanical factor to him is being able to time his W to dodge certain abilities. Other than that, his point-and-click CC make him an extremely easy tank that can give tons of disruption in team fights. His sustain and ability to quickly shove out waves with Q make him a more than solid laner, and if your opponent ever tries to force a trade on you, you can simply W them, Q them away, and walk back safely to your side of the lane. Like most tanks, Maokai's main goal is to make it out of laning phase and carry in team fights. While he may not have the instant AoE engage that Malphite has, Maokai has one advantage over Malphite. Even a perfect Malphite ult can be flashed by opponents with quick enough reflexes. But as Maokai, if you go for a flash W against a high priority target, there's nothing they can do about it. Once you've casted it, you'll follow them through flashes, dashes, jumps, and even thrush lanterns, allowing you to lock them down and knock them towards your team. Once you've engaged, you'll throw out your ult to lock up as many enemies as you can and then spam your annoyingly low cooldown Q and W to constantly disrupt the enemy backline, preventing them from damaging your other teammates. Our last top laner is Sion. Thanks to the insane amounts of HP Sion gets from his W's passive, he synergizes incredibly well with items like Sterix Gauge and Titanic Hydra. With items like this in your build, you'll deal just as much damage as many of the bruisers in the game, while being just as hard to bring down as our previous top lane picks. In lane, your Q gives you total control of the wave over your opponent. Not only does it do a great job of helping you shove the wave in, but since it covers such a big chunk of area in the lane when you cast it, your opponent can't even walk up to try and contest the push. If your opponent's target is you instead of the wave, your W's shield lets you shrug off his damage. The hardest part about playing Sion is steering his ult, but once you learn to avoid running into walls, it's an incredibly strong tool for making picks and starting up fights. With its massive hitbox, it's pretty much impossible to miss enemy champs that you catch out in the open, as long as you're aiming in their general direction. Before I move on to the jungle, I need to let you guys know about the discount that we're having over at ProGuides.com. All you need to do is use the code RANKUP2021 to get 20% off of any purchase. Don't forget to use it next time you visit our site. With that said, let's get right back into the video. Now we'll be taking a look at some junglers. With the new jungle meta introduced on 11.4, junglers that simply just power farm and have 0 kill participation 10 minutes into the game aren't exactly reliable carries. The junglers that can influence laners are in a much better spot, but it can still be pretty hard to consistently execute the gank-only / no-farm junglers like Xin, Elise, and Lee Sin if you don't know what you're doing. So the junglers we have combine both concepts, being quick, steady jungle farmers with low mechanical requirements and clear win conditions you can work for consistently every game. With that being said, we'll be starting things off with Skarner. As long as you play around his spires, Skarner's able to win most duels and skirmishes, even in the early game. But that's not your main goal with him, generally speaking. You'll want to power farm, only ganking pre-6 if it's 100% free and the enemy jungler isn't around to counter you. That's because your main goal is to reach 6 and then play around your ult's cooldown to make ganks happen. As the game goes on and you pick up Turbo Chem Tank, your pick potential is immense, with all but guaranteed kills happening every time you have all of your cooldowns up. In solo queue, picking off opponents and forcing objectives 4v5 is one of the best ways to secure wins. So with his foolproof way of consistently doing just that, it's no wonder Skarner's been sitting at such a high win rate for so long. Even after some slight nerfs on 11.4, it's been around 53% in Plat and above. If you prefer more pressure early game and being more about disruption in teamfights than making picks, then maybe Nunu is more your speed. Like Skarner, he's a beefy boy with a quick and healthy clear, and enough CC to lock down your foes and spoon feed your teammates. Unlike Skarner, Nunu can gank early, with some players even opting for cheesy level 2 ganks right after their first buff. But this is about ways to climb consistently, so you'll likely want to stick to a standard level 3 clear, taking both of your buffs, securing Scuttle Crab, and then looking to gank. Ganking with Nunu is incredibly simple. Just check the wave states in each lane and see which enemies may have a wave that's pushing to your team's side of the lane soon. Whether you choose to lane gank, come from river, or even invade the enemy jungle and come in for the gank from behind will all depend on the position of the lane. But as a general rule, if you can use Scuttle's Speed Shrine to speed up your snowball, you'll want to opt for that angle. In teamfights, your main goal is to lock down as many opponents as you can with your W and E, and then charge up a big ult in the middle of the fight. Without CC to immediately stop it, the entire enemy team is forced to try to get out of the potential one-shotting ability, which often leads them scattering, leaving their carries unprotected and easy for your team to pick off. Despite the gank-heavy meta killing off many of the hard-carrying, power-farming junglers, Karthus is still able to thrive. This is due to how his hard-hitting global ult is able to let him participate in fights, even if it's while he's picking up CS in the jungle. On top of that, Karthus is actually strong in early game fights. While he definitely doesn't stand much of a chance 1v1ing most other dueling junglers, if he has a teammate frontlining for him, Karthus can dish out some serious damage. He's also one of the hardest carries to shut down once he's fed. To kill most carries, you want to CC them and dogpile them to burst them down. But in Karthus' case, overcommitting to killing him usually just means taking a ton of damage from his E, with him continuing to pelt your team with Skittles and dropping a fat ult anyways. Basically, once Karthus is in a position to carry, there's not much you can do about it. With jungle still being such a reliable way to influence games, it's the best way to carry an entire team. You can get teammates leads to win lanes and stop the bleeding in the lanes that may otherwise be a lost cause. If you want to learn more about jungling like a pro, visit us at ProGuides.com, where our top-tier coaches can teach you what makes a high-level jungler so good at controlling the map. Whether it's the basics or more advanced things, they can help you whip into shape so you can carry your games no matter how bad your laners are being gapped. Next up, we'll talk about some mid laners. And it wouldn't be a list of the easiest champs to play without mentioning Annie. Like Malphite, Annie is a champ that dates all the way back to League's earliest days of development, and her simplicity really shows it. Sure, she's had some minor adjustments to bring her up to modern standards, but her simple point-and-click, do a ton of damage feel is the same as back then. Something many laners struggle with on mages in the lower elos is farming. While AD champs have harder hitting autos to make securing farm easy, mages don't quite have that luxury. Sure, they generally can shove in waves quicker, but if you spam your abilities wave after wave, it usually means you're going pretty quick. But in Annie's case, her Q makes it feel like you're wearing training wheels for CSing. It refunds all of the mana and half of the cooldown when you last hit with it. and since it's single target, it won't mess up the HP on the other minions. With laning feeling so easy you can play it on autopilot, it gives you a pretty much guaranteed way to make it to the later stages of the game, where you have the zero mechanics required responsibility of flash one-shotting ADCs. Our second mid laner is Pantheon. With his Q giving you cheap spammable wave clear that doubles as poke, his W allowing you to force more aggressive trades, and his E preventing your opponent from even trading back, Pantheon is the king of laning. With the mini rework he got pushing him into a solo laner several patches ago, they also made him scale even better, so you don't have to worry about falling off as soon as the game hits 25 minutes. With his point-and-click CC, you can easily set up your jungler for easy ganks. If your opponent chooses to sit back under towers and wait for waves, you can show them that there's such a thing as playing too respectful. Them sitting all the way back means you have 100% priority, able to help your jungler take scuttle crabs or even take early dragons, and after 6, you can freely look to roam to side lanes with your ult. Our last mid laner is Talon. While most assassins are some of the hardest champs to play as far as the mechanics needed to pull them off, Talon is anything but. His trading revolves around hitting your foe with 3 spells 3 times to proc his passive, and often if you hit level 2 first, you can force a trade onto your opponent hard, which usually results in forcing your opponent back to base if you don't completely kill them, all before they even get their first level up. His excessive damage means that most players sit way back to avoid getting hit. Just like with Pantheon, this means you're able to roam, and with his E's ability to jump all over the ways on the Rift, Talon does this insanely well. Some high elo players take advantage of this, looking to pull off these roams as soon as they hit level 3 or 4. Ganks this early from a different lane are really unexpected, and can do a lot to both snowball you and tilt the enemy team into oblivion. On top of his excellent snowball potential in roams, Talon is also one of the most slippery champs in the game, thanks to his ability to parkour to safety. One of the most common ways games get thrown is when a fed carry gets caught out in a bad spot, giving over a shutdown and giving the other team the chance to take Baron or an in-hit. But with Talon, his kit is incredibly forgiving. In fact, sometimes an entire team collapsing on Talon can result in him being the one to pick up a kill, using the burst from his combo to one-shot a squishy carry or support, and then using his E to hop wall after wall. As you draw all this pressure, your team is free to push other lanes and take turrets on the other side of the map. Moving things down to the bot lane, we have Seraphine. While most ADCs have to deal with the tit-for-tat trading that goes on bot lane, weaving in auto attacks between CSing to punish their opponents, Seraphine has a much simpler time as a laner. Being a mage means that once you have a few levels and your tier of the goddess, you can just spam away, pretty much instantly clearing out waves and avoiding trades or more dangerous all-in fights altogether. The idea is just survive lane and make it to team fights. The really OP part about playing Seraphine is that you'll carry fights hard without ever even having to really get in range of the threats on the enemy team, since you'll be playing the part of dirty Moonstaff abuser. Just keep spamming away, chaining your CC with your teammates at the right times, and you'll coast your way to victory. Our second pick for bot carries has been one of the go-to picks for players learning the role for years due to her simple playstyle as a lane bully. There are several lane bullies in bot lane, but they each have certain drawbacks that make them less consistent than Kate. Lucian and Draven take pretty good mechanics to pull off properly, while with Tristana, you have to know exactly when it's a good time to jump in and take a fight, and requires your support to be on the same page. But with Kate, it's incredibly simple. Instead of forcing fights, you win by simply abusing your long range, chipping away at the opposing laners and their turrets. Even if you're laning with a CC support like Lux or Morg, their hitting a snare doesn't mean you have to overcommit to anything. A simple W and Q from far away lets you take a massive chunk out of the opponent, meaning you never have to run the risk of going all in and being baited for a jungler that's waiting just over the wall. Once you take the tower out in bot lane, your goal is to simply rotate around the map, taking other objectives with your team. Another advantage Kate has over the other lane bullies is her scaling. You aren't as hard-pressed to snowball early since you don't fall off later in the game, so you're perfectly fine with this easy-to-execute style of taking objectives one after another. Our last pick for bot lane is Miss Fortune. Like Kate, she's a really strong laner with very little mechanical requirement. With her hard-hitting passive and Q bounces, you'll want to keep trades short and not so sweet for your opponents. But unlike Kate, who wins via sieging towers and completely zoning opponents with her traps and high range, MF makes this list due to how easy and low risk it is to carry fights with her. Against certain champs, even most fed ADCs can't do much, as being in auto range means you may potentially be one-shot with little to no counterplay. But in MF's case, you can carry fights from a much safer range, simply dropping an E and ulting on top of the entire enemy team. As they fight, your team can put out enough damage to net the win. Just communicate with your team to try and bait the enemy into fighting in a choke point in the jungle, and watch as you melt the entire enemy team's HP bars. Rounding things out with our support picks, we'll probably surprise no one by starting things off with Janna. While there are certainly things that set the great Jannas out there apart from the rest of the pack, when we're talking about easy to play, we're looking at the skill floor, which is the very base level requirements you need to pull a champ off at a level that still contributes meaningfully to the team. So even if you aren't making montage-worthy plays by flash queuing to cancel jumps, you can still be a huge contributing factor by doing the basic things the champ has to offer. In lane, you pressure simply by spamming W on your opponents. Just make sure you're sitting on your Q cooldown against more aggressive foes so you can always disengage. You can also use your high movement speed from your passive and W to zoom around the map and easily help the rest of your team, or just secure vision. But make sure you're doing this on a good roam timer, not when it means leaving your ADC to 1v2 in a bad spot. In teamfights, you don't have to do anything extra. You'll be doing your job just by sitting back and shielding your ADC, and using your ult at the right time to peel and heal up your team in a teamfight. Our second pick for the role is Lulu. While Janna is geared a bit more towards protecting the whole team, Lulu is built more to cater to one carry, usually your ADC, keeping them alive and buffing them up to carry hard. She pairs super well with hyper carries and is definitely a support to abuse if you duo with an ADC main you trust. Her W gives champs like Jinx and Kog'Maw insane damage output, with the movement speed helping the otherwise immobile champs to kite away from danger. Of course, she has a shield to keep her allies healthy, but when that's not enough, her ult helps even more, not only buffing up your ally, but helping to peel with the knockup and slow. One thing Lulu has over other supports is guaranteed point-and-click peel. While champs like Nami and Janna have to aim and time their CC right to peel for a carry, Lulu's W is basically a guaranteed way to shut down even the most fed of threats jumping on your back line. Since it's a homing projectile, not even flash will help your target avoid the incoming CC. While enchanters are generally going to be the easiest champs to play at a baseline level, we wanted to give an option for players that prefer the engaged support playstyle more. That's why, instead of our next option being Nami, we opted for Leona. Of all the engaged supports, Leona is by far the easiest to climb with. There are a few reasons for this, but to start it off, she has the best chance of engaging fights in lane. While hook champs can have their CC avoided simply by standing behind minions, and other engaged supports are generally much shorter in terms of engage range, Leona's E both goes through minions and reaches a pretty far distance of 900 units. On top of that, missing your CC as Leona isn't as punishing as other champs. Moving up and missing your CC with some champs leaves you open to taking a ton of damage. Rell, for example, is left completely slowed as she dismounts, so missing W means you're open to a ton of harass. With not, missing hook sometimes means pulling yourself to a wall or even into the enemy turret, again, opening yourself up to taking damage. But with Leona, missing CC means you just sit back and wait for your next chance. The last thing Leona has going for her is her insane catch potential. While it may be a skill shot, landing Leona's ult is pretty easy, especially against immobile champs. With its massive 1200 case range, you can catch opponents from much further than other engaged champs would allow. In case you aren't exactly sure what range looks like in numbers, that means her ult can be cast at double Ashe's auto attack range. That long range and its extremely short cooldown means you have a lot of opportunities to either force flashes or make picks for your team to help close the game out.
So before you try and lock in that Yasuo into all tanks or Aphelios into all diving champs, stop for a moment and think, what would pro guides do? And pick the easiest champ for the moment. You'll win a lot more games that way. You're welcome. But hey, if you enjoy the video, remember to like and subscribe to the channel and let us know which old champ you think has stood the test of time down in the comments below. And one last thing, again, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can find other League fans looking for games and a community of friends. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video. But until then, good luck on the Rift, stay safe, wash those hands, and I got this. It's a Nerf gun and Kangas keeps hitting me with it.